everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Staying Sane. I'm Jay, and as usual, my partner in crime,
Yes.
Husane.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome, everybody.
Yep.
So, you want to kick her off this week?
Yeah, we can start off with an attack that was in Colorado last day, and a man attacked a crowd with fire bombs, and 8 people were injured. And the person who committed it was known by the name. He was a he was an Egyptian origin man who was a citizen of U.S. So he targeted this group who were having a pro-Israeli demonstration over there, and he was targeting them just because they were someone who is of Jewish origin. So that was his motive. So almost 8 people were injured, and the FBI calls it as a terror attack, and that's how it is now classified. And the person's name is Mohammed Soleiman. He was the person behind it, and he was throwing some kind of bombs made out of bottles and mixing with some acids, and also that was his way of doing the thing. And this happened in the U.S., and this is something which happens after a few days. We listened to another horror story that was the attack against 2 people, a couple who were stabbed and got killed last day, and they were also part of. They were shot at, not stabbing. They were shot at, and they got killed, and just for the reason that they were Jews, and they were also there for fighting uh, the the war, like to end the war and to bring peace in that region. That was their motive, and even then, despite all this, they were getting killed. So this is now happening over and over in the U.S. So I think there will be some sort of an action which will be taken by the FBI and the Trump administration. Maybe in the future they might crack down more on the Islamic terrorism, which is now showing its true colors. So what do you think? From being from that region, how's your take on this, the rise of Islamism, terrorism?
Uh, well, I think some of it is what's the right word? I think the U.S. is again, what's the right word? Interference. The
Hmm.
U.S.'s interference in cultures around the world, most recently, like within Iraq and Iran, Iraq and Afghanistan, that the U.S., and we saw that with the 9/11 terrorist attacks, that, that
Hmm.
U.S. foreign policy has alienated so many in the Muslim world that
Hmm.
in some sense it's self-created. I was actually working in the U.S. When 9/11 happened. I was actually supposed to be on vacation, uh, like leaving that Friday after. But of course, all the planes were grounded. And I remember we always used to go out every Friday, and we'd go to a little English pub and play pool. And one of the girls was like, why do they hate Americans? I'm like, seriously, you don't know? And it's like you stick your nose into everybody else's business. Um, that I think that a lot of like this Islamic fundamentalism has arisen. One, it's come out of like the Wahhabism in Saudi. That was sort of the core of that fundamentalist movement back, a couple of hundred years ago. But then we've seen like in the mid to late 20th century and the 21st century, this imposition. I believe you and we talked about this. We touched on it a couple of weeks ago. Back in I think 1953 or so, the Anglo-American CIA MI6 operation called Operation Ajax, which overthrew the democratically elected president or prime minister. I can't remember of Iran, which then ultimately, I think that the operational term is blowback, right? It blew up in their faces, ultimately resulting in the 1979 Islamic Revolution that has, been a state sponsor of terrorism ever since. So I think the U.S. foreign policy analysts, they kind of need to take some responsibility for
Hmm.
creating this increased environment of Islamic extremism. But yes, it's still rooted in the core passages of the Quran, like the sword passages and things like that. Bible itself, I remember I was criticizing a rabbi. So there's a book called Hitler's Pope, which has actually been recanted. The author actually recanted, saying that Pope Pius XII was actually, you know, cuddling up, not cuddling up, be the wrong word, but like giving in to Hitler. And he's pretty much recanted that premise. But there was a book written by a Jewish rabbi called The Myth of Hitler's Pope, in which he's nominally supposedly going after the factual errors um, in Hitler's Pope, but he only spent like one or two chapters actually doing that. The rest of the book was attacking Islam and going on and on about like all these hideous passages, in the Quran that talk about violence. And I'm like, I wrote a review on Amazon for his book. It's still there. And it was like, dude, like, have you read your own fucking Bible? I mean, it's full of genocide and murder and killing. Like, as the late great comedian George Carlin, when he did his take of the Ten Commandments, he goes, "Thou shalt not kill anyone else unless they pray to a different god than you do. Then it's negotiable." Right? So,
But
like,
but but yeah. So to an extent, when you say this, like the origin of the enmity against U.S. by the Islamist factions or the terrorist groups like this could be related to the foreign policy of the U.S. Yeah, we can read that way. But even if you look back in the history, there's an origin where even before any of these interventions started off, there was a name within the Islamic communities, within the Islamist, the group of people who were looking for a sort of an expansionism throughout the world. So they had an objective of conquering different parts of the world, and even the US or the America, that was not spared. The Europe was not spared. The India was not spared. So there was always a reason like that. So if you go back to the any group claiming all these things like enmity against the West, or they just say that free Palestine and death to America. So what has America has to do for this freeing the Palestine? Because in the history, it was the British who was colonizing that area, capturing from the Ottomans and all such things and all. So we know the British was there. So America, the US, all these things came into the picture very later. But still, they never say that death to the UK, because UK is already dead. That's the problem. So the UK, the London and all, it's already called as the Londonistan. That's how it is now called. And if you go to some of the cities in the UK, you can see even more Muslims and the cultural elements, which is so peculiar to the 7th century religious outfits. That's highly visible in those cities. So that's how the UK has now transformed. And maybe in the future, they might spring back to action and to control all these things. Maybe if they are too late to do that, that country is doomed. So that's what we always say. So in that way, despite having the foreign policy interventions, the US or any country, whether it be US or it be Baltimore or some other place like, not Baltimore, some East Timor, okay, some unknown countries, or maybe any other island countries, even if it is the North Sentinel Island in the Andamans, even that will not be spared if Islam genuinely have an interest of this expansionism. That's how Islam works, because the scriptural backing or the instruction is to convert the whole of the world into an Islamic ummah, where they have this idea, this goal, always fixed upon them, and they always constantly work for that. Even in India, they were having an intention to overthrow the democratic processes in India, and they were having a mission 2047. So what they have to do with the Indian government? And we have this document which was not leaked, but which was recovered from their offices, which was a secret document by the police here. And in that, it's clearly mentioned that by 2047 India should be converted into an Islamic country, and they had a clear vision of how to achieve that goal by delineating the step-by-step process. By first step is to club the Muslims, which is less in number, and to make the number, you have to side with the backward classes, SC, ST, OBC. So you have to make up the population to capture the democratic process. Like you must have the numbers to win the elections. So with that, you will capture the votes and you will get into the power. And then the next step, every home you should have one member of this outfit. The outfit name is called Popular Friend of India, PFI. So that's how they started off. And finally, on the fifth or fourth step, they have the final showdown comes. The statement is like that: you will replace the Indian constitution with the Quran, the Sharia. That's how it is mentioned over there. And in that case, if in the worst case, if you require an assistance from any of your brotherly nations, the outside supporters, you have to make good relations with some of the Islamic countries, and they have named one country, and that is Turkey. So that's how they have a clear plan. So there's no U.S. in the presence. There's no Indian foreign policy or anything like that to do with this. So what I'm saying is, or a sort of a correction to your point, is that it's not about the foreign policy always. It's within the community. It's within the U.S. you have the issue. And it's mostly backed by the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a global phenomenon now. And they have always this plan in action, which is all... it has two phases. One is underground. They always act in the form of genuinely looking, sounding organizations, which could lead some of the charity organizations' activities and all. And on the outside, they will be looking like some of the political movements. They will contest for the elections, the parliament and all. And that's how they do it. So that's a two-tier way of doing things. And the underground players will always make sure that the outside playing that party will be always supported from the ground, and for that they will make use of the woke people who and the liberals and some of the leftists. Their ideals of humanism and all such things will be utilized, kind of a hijacking, to make sure their higher ideal of Islamism, Islamic conquest of that country, will be finalized in a successful manner. So that's how it operates, and it's a common formula. It can be applied anywhere in the world, and that's how it operates. And the best part, I just wanted to make a closing statement on that. That is about how the Middle East is now turning towards against this. Some of the political commentators from the Middle East, they are calling out this openly, and they are now asking for the Western countries, especially the US and the European countries, to stand with the Middle East. And they are even making a bold statement that don't think that you know Islam and the Muslims better than we do. That's how the foreign ministers of the Middle East are telling the people of the West, and I don't see anyone is listening to them or taking them seriously. So it's high time we look at them seriously, because this is a problem. It's not about the failed foreign policy, because this is the problem within Islam and within Islamic countries.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, so that's what
I'm just saying, like, the foreign policy, played a role in increasing the anti-Western, particularly the anti-American
triggers. Yeah,
sentiment.
they act as triggers. Yeah, that's it. That I agree, but that's not the sole reason, or that's the trigger
Oh, no.
point.
That's why I mentioned like the Wahhabism, even going back to the foundational Islam, like there are, and the Arab conquest. So I mean, their history is of conquest and conversion. So that's to be expected. So I remember as you were talking, I was flashing back about 30 years to something I'm pretty sure it was a comedian. He's like, "Wow, the Muslims just blowing shit up." He's like, "Our birth rates are declining, yours are increasing. Just wait 50 years and take over," And that seems to be what their demographic plan is.
Open calls and open, celebrations in some of the Islamic settings where they rejoice having more babies and having, or or by knowing that they will be taking over the democratic process in the coming 15 years or 20 years. So that's how they claim that. And even there's some chart that I have prepared here. We'll take a moment to display it here. It's the fastest breeding religions globally, fertility ranking, and the source is the Pew Research. Okay, you can see the breeding rates. So this is something which I made out of using the data, using the ChatGPT O3. So we can see it here. So the Muslims, they are the fastest breeding, and you get the complete data from the Pew Research. It's already there. So this is something which is happening. And when you come to India, this is something so much visible. And the moment any of the person who is concerned with this, they try to address this, they are badged as the right wing and they are shut off from the discussions. And I don't agree with that, because this is something which we have to focus on. And I don't feel like the increase in the number is something which we have to stop by some kind of forced sterilization or some kind of such activities which was done by some of our past leaders, not from the BJP but from the Congress itself. They had done something like that. So that's not something which we want to stop this. But what I'm trying to do, or what my dream of doing, is to focus on enlightening the people, to make them aware of the problem. And even if the Muslims, their numbers increase, if they are willing to coexist, if they are accepting the principles of coexistence, the numbers don't matter. They can make the better, the world could be made better with such a population of more number of Muslims, if they are concerned about the coexistential
what would be an
principles.
interesting study, maybe for the next show, and by the way, I'm Husane knows I'm on vacation next week, so there'll be no show next week. But maybe for the following show, you could do some more research and compare the rates of Muslim births with the rates of increasing ex-Muslims, and do a comparison of how the rate of change is changing for those who are leaving Islam versus those who are being born into it. Because maybe there might be more ex-Muslims than there are Muslims being born. I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. And there are, and right now I would say honestly that if we do such a comparison, there's a dearth of enough statistics on the numbers of ex-Muslims, because of the fear of coming out. Like, the numbers are not visible right now. So maybe in the future, maybe after 10 years or so, things will be more clearer. And I had a word with the ex-Muslims of North America, and they're having a vision of having such a numbers, to do a survey of the actual numbers of ex-Muslims. And even they are agreeing that it's not possible right now because of this reason. Because apostasy punishments is the number one reason why Muslims are not able to express it so openly, just like other religious people are able to do. So we have that problem here. Yeah. So I think we will have to wait for maybe minimum 5 years more to get a good number or a good study on that.
Well, at least in the Islamic republics, yes, but in ex-Muslims in the Western countries, we should be able to do that. Pew could do that, within the next year, like maybe surveying those in. Yeah. But obviously those in the other countries are going to be an issue, like places like Pakistan.
But there are statistics which says that the number of people who are leaving Islam after converting it into Islam, and that's about 1 out of 4, I think. There's a study already published that was in the past, and maybe we'll have to look for more numbers. And there are some other studies which came from the Gammon research, and that was from the Middle East, and it says almost 60% of the Iranian population, they are now atheists, and there are some atheists. Yeah. So that's happening in the country Iran.
I would imagine that's probably twofold factors. You've probably got the increasing access to information, but you've also got a population that's completely fed up with living under the restrictions of an Islamic regime. So
So if there happens or if there occurs a time in our timeline where Islam reduces in number in its followers, I would say the most number of countries where they will see a decrease in the numbers will be the Middle East. And at the same time, you will see the increasing shift of the belief and the extremism and all in the Western countries. So there will be a replacement of the weight of the Muslims who are more troublemakers from the Middle East to the West. So and I think that will give a chance for the governments to act in a way that can properly control it. And if they succeed in that, that will be the end of Islamism, the rise of Islamic extremism. So I think that's how it is going to happen.
Well,
So
there's always going to be examples of fundamental extremism in any of the major religions. It's just, it's going to be
right.
less and less and less, but there'll still be the isolated incidents. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I did a meme like 5, 10 years ago, just speculating, within 500 years, the Vatican will be a museum, that there'll be no Catholics left to support, or there'll be so few Catholics left that the Vatican will just be a museum.
Yeah, there's a comment here, interesting. Bring
Yeah,
back
I saw
the
it.
Persian cultural values. I happened to speak to one of the Iranian ex-Muslim, and she was talking so high about the Persian culture and all such things. And I was wondering if I, as an ex-Muslim, was able to talk about the Hindu culture and the Indian cultural factors. So that's one of the biggest differences. And I was jealous of her because if I start speaking about the Indian culture and its values and other things, I'll be badged as a right winger here. But for her, that was not the case. So that's something which I saw as a difference between an Indian ex-Muslim and an Iranian ex-Muslim. I just wanted to make a fun fact on that. But apart from the joke in that, what Nazween is saying is something so much valuable here, because every country had a history of their own cultural values, which was overpowered, or which was completely erased or replaced by Islamic
Consumed
things.
by Islam.
Yeah, so that has happened everywhere. It's not just Iran or India or any other place. If you even go to the Afghanistan, you will see sort of examples like that. So
Well, and
we have to
Persia
bring
has such a rich,
rich, yeah,
rich history, that it would be nice to actually
yeah,
see the Islamic Republic go go away, and the
yeah,
the freedom of the people, to not only to express their own individuality, but to explore the history of Persian culture, because it's really quite fascinating. Like
yeah,
I in one of my articles, or no, it's actually in my book. The book I'm doing on the broader history of secularism. I
yeah,
point to the Persian influence, both in India, right? Because the Persians conquered the Indus Valley, and so it's coming into contact with Buddhism. It's coming into contact with sort of, at that time in the 500s BC. Yeah, the Hindu synthesis occurred about 500 years before, so I wouldn't say early Hinduism, because it's already been around for about 500 years by that point. But you've not only that, but their influence on Greek philosophy, right? Because they control Ionia, which is modern day Turkey, which is where the pre-Socratics, Thales of Miletus is in Ionia, on the western coast of modern Turkey. Um, and so through the Persian trade networks between India and Greece, right, there's this transmission of knowledge being facilitated by the Persians with astronomy and mathematics. Yeah, it's really quite a very interesting history, that and not only that, but the Persian, like when the Jews were taken captive by the Babylonians, they become immersed in this Sumerian culture and these Persian, Zoroastrian dualistic myths, and that really becomes very, very richly absorbed, not into just Judaism, but it gets infused into Christianity, and then through both Judaism and Christianity, it gets passed into Islam. So, like, actually, I think I've maybe mentioned it on the show before. I know I've talked about it in the past. I don't know if I've talked about it here. When I worked in Pakistan several years ago, I was having a conversation with somebody, and he was getting really irritated with me, because I was confronting all of his Islamic bullshit with hard facts. And I was talking about, like, these Zoroastrian influences, like, So the dualism, like the light, dark, good versus evil, Ahura Mazda in contrast, in eternal contrast with Ahriman, the evil, right? Because in Judaism or in any of the Abrahamic faiths is God and the devil, right?
Yeah.
And so I was saying, like, even in like this end times apocalyptic battle is a Zoroastrian story. He goes, no, no, this is Islam. I'm like, no, dude, this shows up
E-
in Zoroastrianism like 2,000 years before Islam is even
Islam. Yeah.
created. It's in the book of Revelation, which is like 500 years before
Did you
Islam.
did
Like,
you did you get a
come on,
chance to
dude.
ask him about the winged horse and the journey to the heavens, which is also part of
Uh,
this Zoroastrianism?
I I don't remember. I've done some memes on that, but I don't think
Okay.
I've mentioned that to him. So
Anyway, there's a new trend that people are now creating videos using that VO platform by Google, I think. So they're now creating videos by the Moses, the Mary, the Christ, and all people. Now I'm also planning to make a video by Muhammad, especially the journey to the heavens and taking a selfie and making a video while traveling. Yeah, yeah. Hello guys, this is good. So we can stream that. And the talk which I had with Iranian ex-Muslim, it's with me here, and I think we can once I can work on that, we can upload that video even this channel so people can watch over here too. So that's a
speaking
good
of
one.
videos, did you or any of our viewers, if you haven't seen it, go on YouTube and look for it. Jordan Peterson's spectacular implosion last week. It
Oh.
was Jordan Peterson versus 20 atheists. It was originally titled One Christian versus 20 atheists, but Jordan, being the putz that he is, I'm not a Christian. Like there was even this one, he's like, well, you say I'm a Christian. I didn't say I'm a Christian. And yet, one of the videos I saw deconstructing this video was they had interspliced some clips, one where he's on Alex O'Connor's show and one where he was on another show. I can't remember which one it was, where Jordan actually admits that he believes in the literal resurrection of Jesus Christ. And yet the stupid fuck just can't admit that he's a Christian. Just he can't come out and admit it. So if you haven't seen this
We'll
video,
watch it
it's
definitely.
really like
What?
the kid who's
Yeah.
asking, like, are you a Christian? You know,
Is
Jordan
it a
looks, he goes,
long
"Yeah,
video?
like, I've only seen the clips.
Oh, okay.
But
So
like
if
Jordan
you
looks at
get
this
it,
one kid, he goes, "You're really quite something," and the kid goes, "Yeah," and you're really quite nothing. And then Jordan goes,
so
"That's it, I'm done."
why don't we plan a live roasting of that video in one of our
Okay,
sessions, maybe next week or afterwards? We can
sure.
plan that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can do that. We must do that because that's one person who is maligning this domain of atheism and mixing the religion and giving a picture like he's totally shifting things between. Like he's not having a common ground always, and he obscures the facts and delivers things with
Oh
gibberish.
yeah,
So that's the
yeah.
biggest problem.
He's like Trump. If you can't dazzle them with brilliance, bamboozle them with bullshit.
Yep.
And that is very much Peterson's tactic.
Yeah,
Is
that's it.
he is speaking to a functionally illiterate audience. And I don't mean illiterate like that they can't read. I mean illiterate in the fact they are not read up on history, on religion, on philosophy. They
Have
don't
you seen?
know that Jordan is just completely bullshitting them, and they
Yeah.
just take him at his
Have
word.
you
But people like me, I know the history, I know the psychology. I can sit there and go, dude, this is
anything?
completely wrong.
Have you come across the Deepak Chopra
Oh God.
conversation
Uh,
generator? Have you seen that?
uh, no, but I can't stand
No,
you actually.
we can program something like Jordan Peterson chat generator. So it's like you can just randomly click something and you'll get some things like total nonsense. But if you just read out that, things will be it sounds like something so intellectual. That's the problem. That's the
I
beauty
think
of it,
I've
gibberish.
seen something like that before.
I'll try displaying it
I
here.
think Richard Dawkins listed it in one of his books. It's called like the postmodernist generator or something. So it sounds very much like this
Yeah.
Deepak Chopra one, that it will just spit out like this postmodernist gibberish.
Yeah, this is random Deepak Chopra quote generator. That's how it is called.
Oh
I will
God.
try displaying it here and we'll find something. Oh my God, it's not accessible here. Anyway, here we have a question by Adarsh that's about will Islamic extremism demolish democracy? What do you think? I think no. You can
No.
explain if you have a
I mean,
different opinion on that.
demographically, yes, if secularists stop having children altogether, and the the Muslims are continuing. I don't know. Can I bring it up? Let me see. I'm going to bring your thing back up. If you look at the Jews, now I've read some studies on this in the past. You've got Jews here as the sixth. Now I would wager, having seen some research before, that that why the Jews are number six is almost completely amongst the ultra Orthodox community who are having like
Right.
7 and 8 kids, which to me, I would speculate that's going to be a demographic time bomb for Israel, because if the ultra Orthodox Jews end up becoming the majority, who's going to fight in the IDF? There'll be nobody left to defend them. So they're kind of screwing themselves, literally.
Right. So that's a bigger problem if demographics shift like that. But at the same time, as I said earlier, if those
Secular
people who are
demographics,
coming out,
for
yeah,
sure.
if they are more secular,
Nuns are the
they
fastest
believe,
growing demographic.
yeah,
Actually, oh, interesting. So you know, I don't know if we've talked about it here on the show. I think maybe we talked about it a week or two ago. I'm working on a book. I finished it Monday night, and I was reviewing it yesterday and today. And just before the show, I added a new 2 or 3 sentences because I was reviewing. So the book it draws on Indian cultural heritage and Chinese cultural heritage. So the Hindu transcendence, Buddhist transcendence, Tiantai Buddhism in China, and Taoism, and looking at sort of these common threads of transcendence experiences that are common throughout these Asian philosophies. But I wanted to look at the psychological studies, and so I found several actually. Then I was rereading my summary of one of them that was specifically about God experiences, and I was reading something that it made me tweak something. I actually went back to the psychological study and I reread it, and I just added this to it. That there were 3 categories of people in this psychological study on having a mystical experience with the transcendent divine: atheists, self-identified atheists, self-identified monotheists, and self-identified nuns. The others, neither monotheist nor they don't identify as atheist or as monotheist.
agnostics. Yeah.
What tweaked for me was, okay, yeah, it said like the number of atheists, like they were atheists before having this mystical God experience. And they had a control group. They had non-drug induced, and they had 4 psychedelically induced states of mystical transcendence. And across all 4, non and drug, primarily with the drugs though, like the atheists dropped by half. So like of the participants, like 20% were self-identified atheists, below 10% after having this transcendent God experience. But that was okay, yeah. So that was just people had this experience and they were atheists, and now they think they saw God. But what was really interesting was those who identified as monotheists also dropped, not by as much, not by half, but the monotheists also decreased. But where did the atheist and the monotheism dropping? Where did it go to? It went to the others. The others increased. People who had this transcendent experience of cosmic infinity. The number of nuns went up. Atheists and monotheists went down, but the nuns went up. So even though it doesn't really say they went from being atheist to monotheist, but maybe a handful of them did. But it's at least on a surface examination, it looks like both atheists and monotheists shifted to an agnostic perspective after having this mystical experience, which I thought was really, really intriguing. So,
Yeah. So here Adarsh is having another comment over that. That's about the countries doesn't have democracy. Example, China controls religion, but the cradles of democracy nations can
That's not
control religious
exactly
extremism.
that's not exactly true. There is a I remember hearing a stat about 10 years ago. I was at a Skeptics in the Pub event. Um, Somebody actually mentioned, and I could be wrong on this. I might maybe I'm conflating it with another with Falun Gong. Like there are more Falun Gong members than there are members of the People's of the Communist Party. Um, but I similarly I have this memory of reading that there are more Christians in China than there are members who are members of the Communist Party. So yes, they control, they do control religion, but this book that I'm working on with Brooks Porian from the School of Divinity at the University of Chicago on these transcendent experiences and looking at Taoism, Hinduism, Tiantai, this stuff, he makes a really interesting point that monotheism never took hold in China. It just never caught on there. Like it had like a brief, like under Moism, very, very brief shelf life. And then the nature of Confucianism, of Taoism, and of Tiantai Buddhism essentially extinguished this monotheistic sense in China. So while China does control it, China is also a very highly atheistic society, very, very atheistic, and has been throughout the last 3,000 years. Um, so, but yeah, I mean, he's got a point about the democratic nations. Like, look at the U.S., like what's going on with the MAGA groups in the U.S. Like,
Yeah,
their
but
rights are being systematically undermined.
I look at this problem in a different way. That is, this is something which we are facing for the first time. The Islamic extremism versus democracy. This is something which is new. Uh, I would say it that way. So yes, we have a problem now. That is, democracies are getting hijacked by these people for their own agendas. That's happening, but that's not gonna be there forever. So what happens next is they will they will fight back, and for that it's not an easy job. There will be commotion, there will be some sort of agitations and other things. So that's not a smooth ride, but obviously there will be problem, and for that we will have some beacons of hope from the Middle East, especially the UAE and some other countries are standing tall in that area where they are controlling the Islamic Brotherhood and other teams like that, and giving us the democratic countries a signal of where to attack, where to focus on. So that's one way by which democracies can focus on their actions to counter this. And this is something which is new, and this is now evolving, and I think it will take maybe 5 or 10 years or maybe 20 years to get a good control on this. It's not an easy job, because this is a kind of a cancer which has now grown into the democratic countries, and we have to control this. And there's no fight, there's no going back in this, because we have to win this, and only a democratic country can win this without much bloodshed. And this can be done with proper
Education.
yeah, education and proper rules and regulations, just like what we did with in India, the banning of organizations, and even other countries are doing the same. And one good example we always speak about is the way Poland was able to control this by containing the illegal immigration, and at the same time giving options for the genuine immigrants, and trying to integrate into the society. So they are focusing on more into integration. So that works. So that's how it goes on. So multiculturalism and other things, obviously there's a problem with that. We need multiculturalism, but at the same time, if that happens to be a loophole for the Islamist factions to overpower the existing cultures, the cultures into which they were taken in, then there's a problem. So we have to watch that. So
Yeah.
that's how I
Well,
think this will.
obviously, the secular democratic nations, they're not, except for the U.S., they're not autocratic. They have to follow the rule
They
of law.
cannot be.
They can't just crack down. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's cracks where the extremism can emerge, but by and large, the society is not going to accept it, and the police do a pretty good job of keeping a lid on. We're never going to know, right? Like what the intelligence services prevent from happening, the general public is never going to know what atrocities never occurred, but they know, but they're not going to release that information. But we have really no way of knowing the level of the things that they're preventing. So
Okay. Anyway, shall we move on, or I think we had a good discussion over this, and I
yeah,
can just give away two more news, which is about the the shooting. Masked gunmen shoot at Gazans seeking humanitarian aid in Khan Yunis, and this was something which was earlier cited as the Gazans being shot by IDF, but later on IDF released the footages of the real incidents, and it came into light that it was not the IDF that who were shooting at the people, it was the Hamas themselves. And now the tables, they have now turned towards the Hamas, and there's total silence everywhere, because if there's no Jews, no news. That's how the the new world normal is. So that's something which is coming from Gaza. And another one is about a blasphemy arrest which happened in India. So Sharmishta Panoli, that's the girl's name. She was a law student, and she was arrested for making some sort of the so-called blasphemous post or comments that she made. And now there's a big uproar in our country where people are saying that the person who filed the complaint against her, he was committing the same mistake or the same crime of blasphemy against the Hindu gods, and nobody wanted to arrest him. But now when she made a post which was not about any direct comment against any of the godly figures in Islam, she was mentioning about the Prophet. It was something she was trying to quote or to explain how the people are seeing the current conflict with the Pakistan, the ongoing conflicts over there. So now the equality before law, that's now the biggest debate going on here. And as per my understanding, this will give the public more confidence in making more open criticism against Islam. That's the new thing that's going to happen in India, because until now criticism of Islam was something which was always under a closed room, or even that was not permitted. But now on, things will change. That's what I'm seeing in this, because criticism of Hinduism is something which is so normal in our country, so that's not a big deal. But for criticism of Islam, this is going to be a big game changer. Incidents like this will pave the way for more criticism. Islam will be ripped in the public. That's what's going to happen. So I just wanted to make that exposed here. So only these are the news from my side. Okay, anything else?
not too much. We've covered a lot. So
Right. So, well, what about concluding this, and we'll try to make another video from Phuket next week. When you are on a beach, we will make a video from there.
okay,
Okay.
we are. I thought I was just going to be on vacation next week. So
Oh, okay. You can.
yeah. I
It's
just
good to
my wife
keep it
my wife
as a
needs a
vacation.
break.
No problem.
Yeah, she's so stressed out. She
You
needs a
need a
break.
break. Yeah, she needs a break
She
too.
does. She does.
Yeah.
I just sit on the beach with my laptop and write. So
Okay. So best wishes. Have a safe
thanks.
travel. So we'll
Thank you.
meet after 2 weeks, right? Or
Great.
we'll skip 1 week, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So
So
okay.
we'll see
We'll
everybody
miss
in
you.
mid-June. All right.
Yeah, we'll
Take
miss
care,
you all.
everybody.
Take care. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.